acknowledge, first of all, before we get started, that we are on Duwamish land. And Monday is Indigenous Peoples Day, that we officially call it now here in Seattle, and many other places are doing that. And so we want to acknowledge that this land was colonized long before we all got here, but we do need to acknowledge that. So I just want everybody to take a minute to acknowledge that where we are right now. I also want to mention that there were a lot of groups and people we invited today that couldn't make it because there was other activities going on, including the People of Color Legislative Summit today. And so a lot of the folks we invited to speak and table were at that event and couldn't be here. We hope this to be one of many events that we have to talk about movement building cross-platform, where we're not all on our own little islands working alone, that we can build unity and work together for a bigger system of ultimately what we really want. And we probably need to discuss what that is at some point. I want to review the itinerary for today. Oops, I gotta turn it on first. Here we go. So the schedule for today, that's me. I'm doing opening comments. I'll also be your MC for today. We have several speakers, and then we're going to have some small group discussion and wrap up the next steps. And there'll be some informal discussion at the end, so stick around. We're hoping to wrap up about 4, but because we're starting a little late in the speaker, I know the reality. We may go end up to 4:30, but we're going to try to move it along as best we can. We definitely need to be out of the room by 5, so that's our deadline for sure. Our speakers today, we have a whole list of speakers. This is the order. Linda Brewster and Judy DeMori from Jefferson County Move to Amend. Nathan Black from Washington Poor People's Campaign. Issa Aero and Cassandra, a.k.a. Cassie Allen from Faribault, Washington. Neil Anderson from 350 Seattle. Cindy Jacobs from Pole, Washington. Kathy Sakahar from the League of Women Voters. Larry Brown, the president of the Washington State Labor Council. Natasha Skarupa, am I pronouncing that right? Field Director for Camilla Jayapal, Nick Makata, who's an author and a retired Seattle City Council member, and our keynote speaker will be Loretta Gonzalez. She'll be arriving a little bit later. I also want to thank our sponsors. Obviously, they're one of the sponsors as well as Move to Amend, the League of Women Voters, Seattle King County, Pole, Washington, and 350 Seattle. So I'm sure we could have added to this list, but that's all I had time for. I want to get into, before we bring on the first speakers, just give you a quick summary about the work that we've been doing here in Washington State. But I need to go back one because I skipped ahead something. We did have to pay for the room, so if you were able to donate a few dollars, please put it in the jar on the table in the back to cover our expenses. That would be fabulous. I also want to mention the groups tabling back there. We have Washington Poor People's Campaign. Nick Makata has his book out. Fix Democracy First, Move to Amend, League of Women Voters, Seattle County, Fair Vote, and Whole Washington way back there. And I forgot the name of your... All right, so now I want to, and it's a new campaign, so I'm sorry I forgot the name of it, so it's a new one. I want to talk about some of the wins we've had around democracy here in the state because it shows you where the direction Washington State is going. And we're actually a leader in the country on a lot of democracy issues. Back in January 2017, there was an article in the Huffington Post that said, "Can one state save American democracy?" And they were talking about Washington State. And we're trying to prove them right. And so these are some of the bills that we passed in 2018. We passed the Washington Voting Rights Act, which is the strongest vote. We think it's stronger than even California's. We passed automatic voter registration, so now people, when they get an enhanced driver's license, or they interact with health exchange, or next year with the Department of Health and Social Services, they'll be automatically able to register to vote. And my favorite one on this list is same-day voter registration. So you can still vote up to 8 days, or register online up to 8 days before the election. And in those last 8 days, you can go into an elections office or auditor's office in your county and register and vote up to same day, 8 p.m. on election day. So that's very good. We also have pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. And that is a new one. So we can pre-register them so they're on the voting rolls by the time they're 18. And the League of Women Voters is registered people voter reg forms in the back. And I want to shout out the Washington Disclose Act of 2018, which the League of Women Voters and Fixed Democracy First were pretty much the only people working on that one. But we did get that passed, and that requires 501c4s. I'm going to start getting in right now to the speakers. So the first two speakers, why don't you come on up, Judy and Linda. Judy and Linda, Linda Brewster, she's the chair of Fixed Democracy First, but she's also leading Jefferson County Move to Amend along with Judy DeMore. For those of you that don't know, we'll talk more about this, but Move to Amend is a national nonpartisan grassroots organization that seeks to blunt corporate power by amending the U.S. Constitution and corporate personhood and money as free speech. So here they are, Linda and Judy.
Okay, so Linda and I are coordinators of the Jefferson County Move to Amend group, which is a local affiliate of the National Move to Amend Coalition. And the National Move to Amend Coalition started by a group of people who were involved with progressive issues as much as we are. And they wanted to pull together marginalized groups to build a vibrant democracy accountable to the people, not to corporate interests. And they understood that the rise of corporate power over our society got started when corporations were made legal people, and they were allowed to claim the constitutional rights of people. And since these maneuvers were done by the Supreme Court, the only way to turn that around is to amend the Constitution. So they formed the Move to Amend Coalition and began working for the We the People Amendment to clarify that corporations are not people and money is not speech. And you've probably heard about other groups that are also trying to get money out of politics, such as American Promise, Public Citizen, MovePAC, etc. And Move to Amend is a little bit different from them. We're unique because Move to Amend focuses on growing a grassroots movement in every state, and it allies itself with populations who are the most impacted by corporate power. And it's also the only group really committed to ending corporate constitutional rights. So why is ending corporate constitutional rights so important? Well, first of all, corporations did exist when the country was founded, but they were not given free rein. The Constitution makes no mention of them, and the writers of the Constitution never imagined that the human rights they enshrined for people would be applied to corporations. And the problem got started in 1886 when a clerical error allowed the Southern Pacific Railroad to claim it was a person, and then it used the 14th Amendment to sue for discrimination against this county that had raised its taxes. Now, the 14th Amendment was not written for corporations. It was written to prevent freed slaves from discrimination. But in the years since, it has been used 100 times more often to protect corporations from discrimination than the rights of African Americans. And thanks to this court decision, small communities like mine can be sued for discrimination if we try to keep big corporations from moving in and destroying our small town's character and its family-owned businesses. And it's depriving us of our right to create and protect communities that we want to live in. So after gaining personhood status, corporations continued using our constitutional rights for their benefit. So, for example, the search and seizure clause of the Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures by government officials without a warrant. But corporations are now using the search and seizure clause to avoid unscheduled site inspections for worker safety conditions, potential environmental hazards, and making it easier to conceal violations. So as a result, certain industries are now almost completely unregulated. And who loses when this goes on? Obviously not the corporations. The Fifth Amendment includes what we know as the takings clause, that private property shall not be taken from a person for public use without just compensation. But corporations have now hijacked the taking clause to fight back whenever a regulation infringes on their profits. If a federal, state, or local government enacts a regulation to protect workers, consumers, or the environment, corporations can sue, and not just for the loss of current assets, but for hypothetical future profits too. You can imagine the chilling effect this has on our legislators when they're considering regulating in the public interest. In NAFTA and other free trade agreements, corporate takings rights were folded into investor-state settlement clauses, allowing foreign corporations to sue governments that pass regulations that interfere with future profits. So corporate rights have been consistently dominating our sovereign rights, and they'll continue to do so in the next version of NAFTA 2.0, USMCA. The First Amendment protects the people's right of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, etc. And these rights give corporations a lot of tools to work with. In 1976, the Supreme Court confirmed that corporations' right to speak about politics, but because they didn't have mouths to speak with, corporations got to speak by spending money. So this decision set the stage for the landmark Citizens United decision in 2012. And based on that earlier decision, money was speech. The court then removed all limits on corporate spending in elections, reversing over 100 years of congressional authority to regulate federal elections. And this sent shockwaves through our political system. And I'm sure we can agree that ending Citizens United is essential to rescue our democracy, but keep in mind it was earlier court cases that set the stage for Citizens United, including giving corporations personhood rights to begin with. So we need to reverse those decisions to end Citizens United for good. After the Citizens United decision, the court gave people the right to spend unlimited money in elections too. And although this doesn't apply to corporate power, it also magnifies the influence of the 1% who are usually connected to corporations, the power of them over the rest of us, and it confirms that money equals speech is now accepted as the law of the land. And we know that the First Amendment protects our right to speak, but did you know that the First Amendment gives corporations the right not to speak? Court cases in 1986 and 96 clarified that they have the right to hide information from us about their business practices, additives to their products, or risks to our health and safety. Do the products you buy contain GMO ingredients, glyphosate, bovine growth hormone? Are there health risks that you don't know about? You can thank the First Amendment right not to speak for that. Today, with the corporate money speaking louder than ever, corporations are taking aim at our First Amendment rights. Through associations like ALEC, they are helping introduce legislation in state legislatures across the country to criminalize acts of peaceful protest on public land. This is a direct attack on our First Amendment rights. And likewise, as corporations are defending their privacy from us, our privacy is threatened by corporate surveillance as we speak. So I'm going to skip the next slide because I have to speak quickly. Hopefully this clarifies why we're determined to pass this constitutional amendment to end corporate personhood and money as speech. And I'm going to turn over to Linda to bring you up to date on the movement for an amendment here in Washington and across the country.
So, a move to amend inspired Initiative 735. And that initiative began in 2012. A group of Washington volunteers started to build a movement. And that movement led to the formation of WAMAN. And we launched a citizen initiative campaign to make Washington the 18th state to demand that Congress pass a constitutional amendment to control corporate power. And you know, I-735 asked our congressional delegation to propose a constitutional amendment. And that amendment would clarify that corporations should not have the constitutional rights of personhood, that campaign donations aren't speech and should not be protected by the First Amendment, and that all campaign donations and expenditures must be disclosed. This language was modeled after the language of Indy Men's We the People Amendment. Who here gathered signatures for I-735? And you probably know then that we passed it in 2016 by 63% majority, and I never get tired of saying and bragging that we passed it in all 10 congressional districts, which means that all 10 of our members of Congress should be supporting HJR 48. So, of course, we sort of assumed our work would would be over with that powerful a victory behind this, but we soon learned that it was going to take a lot more persistence on our part to persuade our congressional representatives to co-sponsor the House bill for the We the People Amendment, which is House Joint Resolution 48. After passing I-735 in 2017, we were able to get 5 of our 6 Democratic members of Congress to co-sponsor. And every 2 session of Congress, you have to reintroduce it. So this congressional session, HJR was reintroduced in February 2014 by our very own Camilla Dial. And again, with great persistence, we were able to get the representatives who had co-sponsored in the previous session, as well as picking up, again with great persistence, Kim Schreier as a new co-sponsor. Representative Rick Larson of CD2 has not co-sponsored, and of course our, I shouldn't say of course, and our 3 Republican representatives have remained holdouts, in spite of the fact that our results would show that this was a non-partisan issue. Okay, so HJR 48 now has 64 co-sponsors in the House, plus of course its lead sponsor, Representative Jayapal. There is still no senator willing to introduce this companion bill, a companion bill to that HJR 48 in our Senate. Both Murray and Cantwell have been asked to do so. Murray has indicated that she might, but neither of them are certainly willing to take the lead on introducing it. It's a heavy load, they say. We've been carrying a heavy load too, I think. So HJR 48, there are lots of other amendment bills, well there are some in the House, but only HJR 48 has the strong language of We the People Amendment. The other bills would give Congress the power to limit campaign donations and the power to distinguish between corporations and people, but they wouldn't require that Congress take any action. And with so many Congress members dependent upon those corporate donations, really, can we really expect them to? So these other amendment bills also do not reverse the series of past court decisions expanding the personhood rights of corporations, which led to Citizens United. So they're content with cutting off the leaves of the plant, but not digging to get the root out. Without the strong amendment language of HJR 48, it's possible nothing at all will change. So we believe that to attain any of the goals necessary for the people and the planet to thrive, it's essential to assert democratic authority over corporations. The time for action is now, and it's going to take all of us.
Thank you, Linda and Judy. Our next speaker is Nathan Black with the Washington Poor People's Campaign. He'll tell you more about it, but the Poor People's Campaign is building a long-term movement that is building power for the justice and liberation of the poor and all those impacted by the evils of systematic racism, the war economy, ecological devastation, poverty, and a restorative long term. Get that right off the website. So let's welcome Nathan.
Thank you, Cindy, for the invitation to be here. I bring you greetings from a lot of people, from Reverend William Barber III and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris, the co-chairs of the National Poor People's Campaign, which is a revitalization of the campaign that was started 50 years ago by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to address the needs of the poor and the powerless. I also bring you greetings from the United Church of Christ, where I am seeking ordination. I'm serving as a chaplain at the VA's Addiction Treatment Center currently. I'm also one of the tri-chairs for the Washington State Poor People's Campaign. I work with Reverend Bianca Davis Lovelace and Jonathan Hemphill from Tacoma. And we are building a movement. Many of you here are representing organizations and working on building movements. The Poor People's Campaign is intentionally not building an organization. We are building a movement of people that have been oppressed by poverty, by systemic racism, by ecological devastation, by our war economy, and by the distorted moral narrative in our country, to take back that power. So I've got some notes here so I don't lose track here. Reverend Dr. Barber says that poverty, it is not a sin to be poor, but poverty is a sin. In the richest nation in the world, in one of the richest states in this nation, in one of the richest counties in this nation, we have, so in the state of Washington, 41%, or 2.9 million people are poor or low income. We have our African American, our black residents being incarcerated at 6 times the rate of our white residents. 1.1 million people in Washington state make under $15 an hour. That is 37% of Washington's workforce. As progressive and as wonderful as we are, and as we like to think we are, we have much work to do, even in our community, as many of you already know, of course. So the Poor People's Campaign, we're telling the truth. We're telling the truth about these 5 evils. We're shifting the narrators. One of our strategies is to shift the narration, shift the narrative about these situations by shifting who is telling the story. So when we're at rallies and events, you're going to hear people that are directly impacted by homelessness, by poverty, by systemic racism, by all of these evils. People are empowered to speak from their own truth and to make their demands of our legislators, of our community themselves, and not to have the typical guys that look like me do the speaking. Speaking of myself, it may not be obvious that I've been impacted by these evils. I am from Oklahoma and grew up in pretty abject poverty. My sister-in-law, to give you a sense of this, her name is Sarah, she grew up without having access to health care and had diabetes. At 26 years old, she had to have half of her foot removed because of lack of treatment. My family are continually worried about being evicted, worried about losing jobs, worried about the kids getting sick. And even though I went to seminary, I'm working in a professional job, I've escaped some of that poverty, it is still crushing my heart and my soul because my family are still overwhelmed, still caught. I'm also gay, and it's hard. It's hard these days. I have HI seminary, and one of the comforting things about being in Minnesota was that they had really good health care. They like Washington State, they did a really good job in taking the Affordable Care Act and opening that up to more people. And so I felt some degree of safety, like if I lost my job, I could still live, I could still have access to medicine. And I feel that here in Washington, but I could never go back to Oklahoma at this state, and take that risk. We have so much work to do. On our website, the Washington State Poor People's Campaign website is wapourpeoplescampaign.org. We have been working hard for approximately 2 years to build this movement. We've been active in Olympia, Seattle, Aberdeen, Vancouver, Spokane, and we are working to train and develop leaders, to empower local communities to tell the truth about these situations in their community, these evils that are showing up in their neighborhoods, among their loved ones. The strategy, I don't know if you have heard about the strategy of the Poor People's Campaign. One of the tools that we use is this idea of using a moral fusion analysis when we're looking at these issues. So we have a list of demands on our website that cover all of these different areas. And those demands are crafted out of the real needs, the real live person, people that are suffering by these evils. They're saying what they need, and so these demands have been created. But when we're looking at what's going on, and so like I say, a politician proposes a solution. We're gonna do X bill. Well, we're like, great, let's take that bill and we're gonna do a moral fusion analysis. A moral fusion analysis. We're gonna disaggregate the impact of that bill. How is it impacting the most marginalized? How is it impacting the poor? How is it impacting immigrants? How is it impacting women? How is it impacting queer people? How is it impacting people with disabilities? And who's benefiting from it? Who's profiting from this situation, this dynamic, even the proposed solution to the issue? And so we do this analysis before we will give assent to saying, yes, we're going to throw our weight behind this program or this bill or this solution. We're deeply committed that our work is faithful to our deepest moral values. No compromises. It is immoral that we tolerate the conditions in this country, in this world. I attended just a couple weeks ago in Princeton Seminary the Interfaith Conference on Drone Warfare. Washington State is a hub of militarism. It's a hub of our war economy. Building drones, building fleets, military bases. We have people that are impacted by the environmental devastation of these plans, of this work, of these bases in our communities. We have veterans here. There's approximately 115,000 veterans in the state of Washington that make less than $35,000 a year. That's in Washington State. We have veterans that are, I work with people every day that have been wounded terribly by our warmongering government, our national empire, this warmongering way of being in the world that we have created for so long. They're devastated. They're devastated by PTSD. They're devastated by moral injury, the sense of, how could you send me to do this terrible thing? And they're saying that to the legislators, they're saying that to our government, they're also saying it to us. So our work is deeply faithful work. I'm excited to be here today. We are laying the groundwork for a movement where we're instead of being siloed or we're trying to attack this monstrous evil in our world. You know, we're going to get the leg over here, we're going to get the tail over here, we're going to get the claw over here. We're building together, we're coordinating, and I am excited. I'm excited about that. So thank you all very much. We've got some information on the table. If you want to join up with the campaign personally, there's a pledge card back there. You can fill out your information. There's a fact sheet about Washington State in particular. And I'm very interested in organizational partnership and building that. So thank you all for being here. I hope to talk with you.
Thank you, Nathan. Let's moving right along. I want to bring up our Fairvote folks here, Lisa April and Cassandra Allen from Fairvote, Washington. Fairvote, Washington is part of a nationwide movement for people working to advance ranked choice voting in order to make our democracy more fair, functional, and representative. Cassie and Lisa, come on up.
Hello. Hi, I'm Cassie. I'm the field director for Fairvote, Washington, and I first wanted to start off with two questions. Who here is concerned about the long-term preservation and health of our democracy? By raising hand or verbal shout-out? Both? Yeah? Two arms? As a follow-up question, who here has heard of ranked choice voting? Okay, that is a lot of people. Well, I'll keep this kind of brief then, because I just want to give you a general overview of what ranked choice voting is for the people who don't know it, and maybe just a refresher for the people who have known it about some of the wonderful benefits that really come from it. And just to give you a little background about myself, I have personally worked on campaigns as my background as a political organizer, where I felt like I'm not just voting for the lesser of two evils, I'm working for the lesser of two evils. And it's unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way. I should be able to vote and to work for the campaigns that I really and truly believe in. But so often we're told that to vote for our conscience and for our true values, we're really throwing our vote away at the end of the day. And that's a problem, and that's a huge problem with our democracy that we can solve. So what is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting is a different voting method than the one we have now, where you rank candidates in the order of your preferences on the ballot. You can say your first choice, second choice, third choice, etc. And some of the really great benefits that come from this is that simply we just have more options when it comes to expressing our values in voting. And that doesn't mean you have to choose 3 candidates, 5 candidates. It just means that you have the option to do so. Secondly, and one of my favorite benefits of ranked choice voting is the fact that it really opens the door to non-establishment candidates as well as third-party candidates, which is just so necessary today. And that's really what would allow me to truly express my views, because the majority of Americans almost at this point are not identifying with either major parties. Really, we're almost being left behind because we are forced to choose between 2 options that neither are truly great at the end of the day. Sometimes they really are, sometimes they're not. And the last one that I wanted to say is that in the 21 places in the United States that are currently using ranked choice voting, they're actually finding that it's making campaigning more positive and more civil. Something in the age of divisiveness that we are in right now that could really make an impact in both our daily lives and in politics. It's something that we can actually achieve. And it really brings us together and unites us in a way that so many times we are divided against each other. So I think that's it for me, and I'll turn it over to Lisa real quick.
I'm Lisa Abro, and I'm the chair of Fairport Washington. And I want to just start my remarks quickly by appreciating Fixed Democracy First for its role in getting us started. Not only in hosting this lovely event, but Fixed Democracy First took us under their the louder. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again, Cindy Black and all of your colleagues for hosting this lovely event, but also more than a year ago for taking our little incipient organization, Fairport Washington, under your wings and, sorry? Okay, thank you. Is that better? Good. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. See, she's my mentor all along. So here we are then, growing quickly, and ranked choice voting is an issue that is taking hold around the country. I want to ask you just quickly to stop and think of an issue that you really care about. Not hard in this room where we've got so many activists. Whatever the issue is that you care about, I submit that ranked choice voting is something that you should be putting on your radar. Not because we need you necessarily to volunteer, donate, whatever, get so involved, because I know you're all involved, but support ranked choice voting. It will help you with whatever issue it is you care about. And why is that? For 2 major reasons. First, if you get to fill out a ranked choice ballot as a voter, your vote is more powerful. You have more input in that election. You have the option to say who you really care about, like Cassie was just saying. You don't have to strategically worry about, oh gosh, I like this candidate best, but I don't want to waste my vote or throw away my vote on that person who might not be a front runner, and therefore I'm going to vote for this other person who may be the lesser of 2 evils. Not only do you not have to do that, but you can go ahead and vote honestly for your first choice, knowing that if that person, that candidate doesn't have enough support to win, your vote will still count for your backup choice, for your next choice. Makes your vote more powerful. And ranked choice voting then, on the flip side, helps candidates be more accountable to the voters, because it takes a majority of support to win a ranked choice election. Did you know that when you get your ballot for the general election, I was looking at some of the Seattle City Council races, so many candidates turning out in the primaries. It's exciting, it's wonderful. Sort of. How do you decide who to vote for? It's that same problem. If you vote for the one you like best, you might be throwing away your vote. So we don't really know what it would look like in terms of majority support for some of these candidates, but I do know from just looking again at the results of our August primary, that in some of those districts, like District 6 had 13 candidates. And one of the people who's advancing only had 20% of the vote. That's what it takes. You can win an election in this country with 20% of the vote. Not a smart way to be choosing our elected officials. We can do better. Ranked choice voting ensures that the winners will have a majority of support. So what are we doing about it here in Washington? We've got a bill in the legislature, the local options bill for ranked choice voting, local options bill for ranked choice voting. House Bill 1722 did quite well last year, did not pass yet. We're going to be back in 2022. See if we can move that across the finish line. We'd love your support, letting your elected officials know that you'd love to have them support the local options bill for ranked choice voting. So this is a common sense, achievable reform. This is not pie in the sky. As Cassie said, we've got cities around the country that are using ranked choice voting very successfully and really appreciating it. Cassie, did you want to say a couple things about how folks can get involved?
So the final things that I were going to say is that I know this is a group of people who are really leaders in our communities. And if there's one thing that you can do to promote ranked choice voting today, it'd be to come back to our table back there and to sign up to say, I support this idea in Washington. Really, the reason that we need people to say that is because the legislators actually take us more seriously when we can say we have X number of supporters. Donors take us more seriously. And also, it also tells us if we are ready to do a statewide ballot initiative and get ranked choice voting a reality in Washington state. It's the only way that we know that we are ready to do that. So today, if you could please come back there and do that, that'd be wonderful. And then my second ask is that we are so open to talking about coalition building and partnerships with all of the organizations here, and we would love to talk to you about that. So same thing, come back, talk to us, and we would love to build partnerships with all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everybody. Moving right along. Our next speaker is Neil Anderson from 350. He's been a volunteer for 350 Seattle and other environmental organizations for the past 3 years, working mostly to stop fossil fuel infrastructure projects. He's currently involved with the campaign for Seattle's Green New Deal. Let's welcome Neil.
For the past 3 years, I've been working with groups like 350 and other climate-focused organizations. As more people become concerned about climate impacts and want us to start moving to clean energy, we find that corporations are doing everything they can to slow our progress, so they can keep us dependent on fossil fuels for as long as possible. Last year, there was a ballot initiative, 1631, that would have put a price on carbon emissions. At first, it was strongly popular. We live in a green state, and most people here want to reduce climate change. And there was a strong push from almost every environmental organization in the state to pass. It should have been enough. But then 4 oil companies spent $30 million to block the will of the people, and protect their profits. They ran intentionally misleading ads that would have been very easy for us to counter, but because all of this money allowed them to buy far more advertising than we could, theirs was the only voice that most people heard. Over 6,000 people volunteered to knock on doors and talk to our neighbors to get the initiative passed, because that many of us care about passing on a healthy planet to future generations. But those 6,000 people's efforts were outweighed by the 4 corporations who were willing to spend whatever it took. And at the end, they were spending over $1 million a day to make sure that this couldn't pass. And now they're at it again. 2 months ago, in another historic first, our city council unanimously passed a resolution calling for a Green New Deal for Seattle. This would spur huge new investment in renewable technology and position us as a leader in the clean energy economy. But one of the provisions would be a ban on new gas hookups in new construction. And that's gotten the attention of Puget Sound Energy, since it would cut into their profits. PSC is a foreign-owned corporation and spends more to influence our local elections than all other fossil fuel companies combined. They're involved in almost every local congressional race, and they generally fund the campaigns of both candidates, so that no matter who wins, they'll still have influence. In this case, they're definitely picking sides, though, and they joined forces with Amazon to try to flip our city council. Amazon wants them out because in their case, last year's proposed head tax would have cut into their profits. So both companies are helping to fund pro-business challengers for every single seat. And if they're successful, it would result in a council that represents the interests of our state's largest corporations, not the interests of the people here. But corporate money doesn't just affect the outcomes of elections. It's so deep in our politics that it fundamentally corrupts the agencies and institutions that were set up to protect us. The Clean Air Agency is a department tasked with regulating the air emissions from industry. They're the ones who are in charge of protecting our health and reducing our state's greenhouse gas emissions. But the previous director developed such a friendly relationship with PSE, our state's largest polluter, that after he retired, he went to work for their board of directors. Now PSE is proposing a new refinery in Tacoma that the residents there don't want. And his former agency has indicated that they'll grant the permit, even though over 400 of us showed up at the last public hearing to speak out against it. People only had 2 minutes each to speak, and the comment period still lasted over 7 hours. Yet even that isn't enough to outweigh the money that changes hands behind the scenes. Across the country, people are starting to realize that climate change is a serious threat, and they want their politicians to start doing something about it. But oil companies are the most profitable corporations that have ever existed, and since money is speech, they can continue to drown out our voices and block any meaningful legislation that would start to reduce our dependence on their products. Last year, the group Sunrise made headlines when they held a sit-in Nancy Pelosi's office to demand that she start drafting a Green New Deal. They got a lot of attention for their call to move us entirely away from fossil fuels. But even more important than that, even more important than the resolution's targets, is their core mandate that all candidates running for office take a pledge that they won't accept contributions from the fossil fuel industry. They built this into their core demands because they recognize that the changes we need will never be possible without removing the corrupting influence of money in politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Our next speaker is Cindy Jacobs from Hull, Washington. Cindy Jacobs is the vice chair for Hull, Washington. She's a registered nurse and an attorney whose practice focuses on healthcare regulatory matters. That's a really powerful combo. She is also a member of the Hull, Washington Initiative Drafting Group. So let's welcome Cindy.
Thanks very much for asking us to be involved in this event. We've got a table back there. I've got a table back there. We've got some information, got some sign-up sheets if you'd like to join our volunteer group, or if you'd like to pledge to help gather some signatures for us when we dive into the initiative pool again. So basically, this is our goal. We're a grassroots nonprofit organization, and we are on the path to universal health care at the state level. As you all probably know, there are bills also introduced at the federal level. We've endorsed those bills. We think those bills are terrific, but it's like that was suspended to be able to happen sooner than the federal level. So why do we need universal health care? I could talk all day about this, but the main, this is kind of like the compressed version of the most, I think the most important reasons why we need universal health care in this country, and we might as well start with our state. So the United States spends more on health care by a lot, I mean a whole lot, there are statistics out there, than other developed countries. Why is that? It's because our system is very fragmented. We do not have economies of scale. We have no administrative efficiencies. That all costs a lot of money. And it's a result of unfettered capitalism and a profit insurance model. U.S. healthcare outcomes, so we spend all this money, right? And you'll hear people say, oh yeah, we have the best healthcare, but we don't. Our health outcomes are worse than other developed countries, again, by a lot. It's things like life expectancy, maternal infant mortality in this country are shameful. Chronic condition outcomes, we just basically don't score on much of anything. The insurance model does not give healthcare. It's a terrible model for healthcare. Why is that? Because everybody uses the product. Insurance doesn't work if every single person who pays a premium uses the product. Think about your auto insurance. The profit model does not fit. Healthcare is more like infrastructure. It should be more like, it's not a commodity. It's more like infrastructure. The risk pool is not spread out enough, and that's as a result of all of this. Because we have so many uninsured and underinsured people, our risk pool is just, we don't have everybody in it that we need. So, at Whole Washington, what did we do about this? Well, we've been at it for a while. In 2018, we did file a ballot initiative, I-1600, and I was on the drafting group for this. And I-1600 was a complete and completely funded. If you hear about other healthcare bills, ask if it's an unfunded mandate. That is the kiss of death. And ours was completely funded, and it's a universal coverage program and plan. We did manage to gather 100,000 signatures, which was pretty respectable, but you don't have a lot of time, and we didn't have the funding to use paid signature gatherers. So we learned a lot. We took our ballot initiative, and in the fall of 2018, we worked with outgoing Senator Marilyn Chase, who facilitated our ability to talk with the Department of Revenue and Employment Security Department, because they would actually be administering the collection of some of the funding pieces of this. And we made some small revisions that would be more easily implemented using our existing state structure. And DOR and ESD were great. They were great. We came out of that with Senate Bill 5222, which was introduced in January in the state Senate. It's stuck in committee. A number of reasons, one of which has to do with donors for people on the healthcare committee. This won't surprise anybody in this room. It is still alive, technically, and doesn't have to be reintroduced. So it's still sitting in the committee, available if there's enough pressure to get it a hearing, at least. That might help. We're also looking for a sponsor to do a companion bill in the House. So we're still working the legislative aspect. We went ahead and we took 5222 and we filed it as an initiative for the narrow purpose of conducting polling. We did not intend to gather any signatures, but we wanted to conduct polling to inform our need to do some potential additional revisions for a 2020 initiative campaign, which is where we're going next. So a little bit about it. We had a Washington-specific study done by a nationally known healthcare economist from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, who's looked at federal bills as well over the years. And his name is Dr. Gerald Friedman. His full study is at our website if you're interested, as well as an executive summary. And this is how he broke down how our health trust program would save $9 billion each year in this state. And here's where the savings come from. And you can see that really most of it is administrative costs that we won't have to deal with anymore. So this is the question we always get asked about. How are we going to pay for this? So instead of what you're paying now, I can't stress this enough. This is instead of what you're paying now, not in addition to what you're paying This is funded through 8.5% capital gain, which is that hasn't been quite as coolly received over the past few years as it would have been historically. So the governor has been flirting with that. Then there's a 2% payroll assessment that can be contributed by the employer, but the employer could choose to have that deducted from your payroll. Individual premiums are modest; they cannot exceed $200 a month, and there are a lot of people who will pay no premiums at all. Under age 19, people earning less than 200% of the poverty level will not pay any premium. And then we've got the employer's piece is 8.5%. And that is in comparison to the employers who currently provide health care for their employees are running about 18 to 20% of their payroll for that. So what's covered? So this is not Medicare. This is Medicare plus the stuff that Medicare doesn't cover. So Medicare needs fixing. So it's basically pretty much everything. Inpatient, outpatient, dental, vision, behavioral health is included, complementary and alternative medicine is included, no copays, no deductibles. There is no network. There is no network. Yeah. The healthcare authority would have negotiating power to negotiate rates with providers, including hospitals, clinics, individual physicians. What's really nice is that the healthcare authority would also have the bargaining power to negotiate prescription drug prices for the state. If you go out of state and you need care out of state, that is covered as well. Rehab rehab care, of course, is included, and that's more physical rehab. Substance abuse and addiction medicine is covered under behavioral health, and then Medicare reimbursement of your premiums would happen unless we can get CMS to say, yeah, you guys can be a demonstration project. Our goal is to get all the money into the same pot, and we would seek those waivers. So what's next? We're still fundraising. We've got donation information at our table. This is our goal to get people to pledge to gather those signatures. Our plan is to file an initiative to the legislature in March of 2020. The reason we are doing that is because we get more time to gather signatures. If we raise enough money, we could go ahead and do another initiative to get people, but we would have to be really confident that we would be able to get those signatures in that squish time frame. For an initiative to the legislature, our signature deadline is January of 2021. And then what happens then is the legislature gets a pass at it. They can either pass as it is, they can introduce, or it goes right to the ballot, and they can introduce their own ballot measure. So, Canada did not start off with a national universal health care coverage system as a country. It started with Saskatchewan. So we want Washington to be Saskatchewan of the U.S. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. All right, our next speaker is Kathy Sakahara with the League of Women Voters. Kathy is a lifelong progressive activist. She has been advocacy leader with the League of Women Voters of Washington for 8 years. She has served as vice president of advocacy and currently leads the League's democracy team and lobbies on elections, voter access, voting rights, and campaign finance. I know her and I are side by side during the legislative session, always testifying. So let's welcome Kathy.
You guys are wonderful. You've been sitting there listening patiently. If anyone wants to stretch, either stand up and stretch or go get a glass of water as I'm talking, I want you to feel really comfortable doing that.
We're mentioning the water in the back.
There's water in the back. that corner, and there are also Cubs. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the League of Women Voters. How many of you know who the League of Women Voters are? Cool. So I'm going to do some so what are some of the things we do? Can you think of anything that the League of Women Voters does?
They represent us.
So we put out what we call TRI. There's some back there. They represent us, which is a book of elected officials. What else? Study issues. Yes, we have a website called Vote 411. Educate voters. A lot of people know that we do that. We register voters, we educate voters, we put on forums. Most people call them debates. We don't, because we don't let candidates talk to each other. They just talk to the audience. So we do all of that. Now, what about candidates? True or false? We endorse candidates.
No.
Good. What about advocacy? We do advocacy.
Yes.
We endorse initiatives.
Yes.
Very cool. You guys are way better than me. Terrific. So I will say that I think often we are better known for our work in what we call voter services or voter education. Excuse me. Can't go far from my water bottle. We are less well known for the advocacy that we do. And before I get into the specific things on our democracy agenda, which is the area I work in, I'll just say very quickly, maybe some of you know this, we work on a broad range of issues. We consider democracy issues our core, but we also work on environmental issues and poverty issues and health care and all the things you've been hearing so far. Next question, true or false? We have so many members and we've been around so long that we don't need any more help or volunteers. Right. This presentation is really not going to be about the league, it's really going to be about you. I'm going to be really blatant here. We need your help. Whatever your passion, whatever you want to do, if your passion is getting a particular party elected, yeah, we're not the place to go to. But if your passion is getting progressive policies at either the state, national, or local level, warrior, your girls. I know I'll get in trouble for using that word. So, our voting justice agenda, I'm going to go through this very quickly. A lot of this Cindy mentioned. Our top priority for this year, we worked on all the bills that Cindy listed earlier. We made a lot of progress, but the top priority this year has to do with campaign finance and ethics. We'd like to move forward, take the great ideas from Seattle and Seattle vouchers, and have some kind of statewide public financing of campaigns. We can't get all the money out of campaigns, but we can make it possible for people who are not rich, don't have deep pocket friends, and are not willing to kiss up to, I won't use the phrase our president just used, I'm not willing to kiss up to big corporate donors to have a chance to run for office with public financing. You heard about a foreign-owned corporation having a huge influence on public policy. Right now, foreign individuals, in theory, cannot influence elections, but it's very hard to keep that money from going through corporations. We're working on changing that. And we also are working to support the Public Disclosure Commission, which we consider ourselves the mothers of. That was an initiative we did back in the 60s. And we want to free up money for them to do their job of enforcing campaign finance rules. And we are supporting the Seattle King County League is supporting the Defend Our Democracy ordinance that you're going to hear more about. We also work on voter access. Cindy mentioned right now, we passed a bill last year, and it's a really good bill, and I don't want to downplay it, but it basically means when someone leaves the custody of corrections, they get a voter registration card. Why they haven't been doing that since we passed the law that their voting rights are reinstated, I don't know. It's a nice step, but we have to go further. I want to say Neil, but is that right? Nathan, I'm so sorry. As Nathan talked about, our criminal justice system is not colorblind. Anything that limits the voting rights of former prisoners also limits, or current prisoners, also limits the voting rights disproportionately of communities of color. So we're supporting two new policies. One would be that while you're on what most of us call parole, we call it community custody, you can still vote. And the other is that if you, right now, if you fall behind on your legal financial obligations, you get out of prison and you owe all kind of money, either restitution or lawyer's fees or whatever. Right now, if you are behind in those, you could lose your right to vote. Guess who's impacted by that? Poor people. You know, the dumb kid who gets caught with cocaine and daddy can write a big fat check the minute he gets out of prison? No problem. We are also looking at the Federal Voting Rights Act has a standard for providing ballot information, voting information, in languages other than English if there is a sufficient population. And we think this state should go beyond what the federal government requires to make sure that people of diverse backgrounds can get good access to ballots and voting information. And the final one is, it's kind of an inside thing, but right now the state doesn't pay proportionately for elections, even when we're electing governors and legislators. That means less money for running elections. That means less money for outreach and voter education from the county elections offices. Hopefully some of you recognize this symbol, the infamous gerrymandered district, which then became, that's where we get the name gerrymander, is there was a district drawn to protect someone named last name Jerry, and it looked like a salamander because the districts are not drawn logically or fairly. They're drawn by parties, so we're going to do some work in that area. On the short term, we're looking at earlier appointments of the commission and having more public access into the decision making and also access on the information they're using. I'm going to say on the long term, Cindy's going to disagree with me because, you know, we'd like to get this bill passed next year so it can be used in 2020. We are introducing a bill that will basically change the way we have a redistricting commission, so it will have many citizens, nonpartisan people on it. Right now, there's basically 4 voting members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. So it's bipartisan, but it is not by any stretch of the imagination nonpartisan. We'd like to see that change by 2030. Sometimes politics happens fast, and sometimes it is very slow. Another area that the League works in is election security, which is getting a lot of attention on the national level, not a lot of funding on the national level, but we've already, the League had a new volunteer a few years ago, and she's already had a huge impact on demonstrating things for the Secretary of State that the Secretary of State did not know about how easy it was to hack an email ballot. And because of that demonstration, the Secretary of State has changed to put out an emergency rule that unless you are overseas or military, you cannot vote by email. Most of us never knew we could. She's also working on audits, and one thing I have found really interesting is where are ballots rejected? A ballot can be rejected before, it used to be if there was no stamp on it. That doesn't happen anymore. If it was mailed too late, if it wasn't signed, or if the signature didn't match. We're looking at, we don't know where that happens. We know how many happen in a county, but we don't know where it's happening. If that happens, a voter has a right to what they call cure the ballot, which is they contact the voter, say, your signature didn't match, you've got to send back in a new signature. Many of those people don't respond. We have seen some data that says that ballots are being rejected in one county, or one area of one county, 10 times the normal rate for people with Latino last name or Hispanic last names. The ballots are rejected disproportionately much. So we're looking at, we didn't think of this initially as just a racial justice issue, but it really is a racial justice. What neighborhoods are ballots being rejected, and then the League and other groups involved here can go into those neighborhoods and do voter education on signing or whatever. And then more access to election records. And last but not least, we are supporting the bill that Lisa and Cassie talked about earlier to allow ranked choice voting locally, and ultimately we'd like to see it adopted in the state. We also are supporting the elimination of advisory votes. Do you know what advisory votes are? Yes. Do you know who started that? Lyman, yes. I think it discourages people from voting. It interferes with our message. It says voting counts, but oh, these 10 votes don't count. And it costs a lot of money. Every issue on the ballot costs more money costs more money for the elections office. So again, I'm here asking for your help. The League, you may not know, is grassroots, volunteer-driven. In this state, we have one full-time office person. Our advocacy is done by volunteers, and we can have a lot of impact, and it's a great experience to represent the League in Olympia. I'd really like to ask for your help and support. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy. So moving right along, we are running a little behind, but we're moving right along here. Next up is Larry Brown from the Washington State Labor Council. Not there yet. Larry Brown was elected at the end of last year to be president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, the state's largest union organization, which represents the interests of more than 600 local union organizations and some 450,000 rank and file members. Personally, I come from a union family. I'm a big fan, and I'd love to see labor make a big comeback. So let's welcome Larry.
Thank you, Cindy. That's wonderful. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here today and speak with all these activists. It's a great thing. Again, my name is Larry Brown. My pronouns are he and him. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Washington State Labor Council. Washington State Labor Council is the largest labor organization in the state of Washington. We represent over 600 local unions across our state and approximately 600,000 union workers. So we're not only thought of as the voice of labor in the state of Washington. My election last year, I was elected, we counted the votes in December, and then I took office in January. But, the election itself, there were some, I think, very important issues that people wanted to talk about. And, there were some folks in the labor community that thought that we should be talking about, core labor issues such as wages, hours, and work conditions, jobs, and economic development. Others thought that we should be talking about race and racial equity and diversity and those issues. And others yet still thought because of the existential threat, we should be talking about climate change. And so, wages and hours and working conditions, it's essential. We have to work on those issues. Race and equity, when we think about the changing demographics of our nation, that we're in the 2040s, we're going to be a majority minority country. It's obvious that we should be working on these issues. If people of color don't see the labor movement as an answer to their problems that they have, we're going to recede into the mist of history as a labor movement. And climate change, we have unions that are directly involved with, industries that are going to be, impacted. But we have everybody is going to be impacted. So no matter, I said to our convention this summer, no matter where your union or you are personally with respect to these priorities, we are all in the same boat. But this boat of ours, this labor boat, it doesn't need oars, it needs ands, because we have to do all this work. So I just wanted to tell you kind of where we are going You know, I really appreciate the subject here today, democracy. I have this working theory, and I want to run it by you, and I'm going to use this in every speech I give from now through the rest of my time at the State Labor Council. You know, that theory of mine is that, you know, if you care about democracy, you have to care about protecting the free trade union movement. And if you care about the union movement, you have to fight for democracy. In every case that I know of throughout history, you do not have a democracy without a free trade union movement. And likewise, there is no instance where you have unions in a country where there is no democracy. The reason, I think the reason is very simple, because, you know, the union movement is about democracy. We elect our leaders in the labor movement. It's not perfect. It's not done exactly right every time, but it is what we try to do, is elect people, give them our voice collectively to speak on our behalf. Sounds exactly like what we do in a democracy. And the same thing is true. If workers can't have democracy, nobody gets to have democracy. So we work really hard to protect that, to participate in that. I cannot tell you how hard our unions work in this state to do that. But we have big challenges ahead of us. Some of them have been mentioned already. Citizens United works against not only democracy, but labor unions. The gerrymandering that's done because the people that we elect select us rather than them select, you know, us selecting them, because they put us in these pools, and so they're immune from our efforts. And it's done on the left and the right. I will say that Washington State has a pretty good system over redistricting. But we have to continue that work. And so I want to tell you why it's so hard, it's so important to support unions. I believe that, you know, there's a saying that if you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. I'm a labor hammer. Every problem that I know of is either going to be solved or improved by having stronger unions. If we look at sociological outcomes, whether they are educational attainment for people, incarceration rates, life expectancy, drug and alcohol addiction, whatever these outcomes are, they're always improved by people that have a livable wage. And the people that have a livable wage, it's always improved by people that have a union. You know, whether you're talking about a machinist, a glazer, a social worker, if you have a union, you're going to earn more money. And, you know, of course, that kind of greed apparently is evil. Corporate greed is good, apparently. But we work hard at, you know, and what do unions want? They want more. They want more for everyone. And if we have, you know, if we have the kind of society where people earn a living wage, then we can have libraries and schools and the senior center and a youth center and paved roads and clean water. And all of these things are supported by having strong unions. I want to thank Lachey for being back here with our R88 I-1000 Washington Fairness Campaign. Very important. I also want to, and remember, vote yes on R88 I-1000. I also want to encourage everyone to vote no on I-976. So, just wanted to mention one other thing, international trade. one of the things that was most reprehensible about the Trans-Pacific Partnership was the ISDS, another attack on democracy. That's the investor-state dispute resolution process, where corporations that, let's say for example, we didn't like the fact that tuna fishing oftentimes kills dolphins, right? So we don't want to import tuna fish that's caught in an unsafe manner that kills dolphins. Well, if Washington State were to do that, or the United States were to do that, ABC Tuna Fishing Company from wherever can sue the local government, state government, or federal government for perceived reduction of profitability. And that adjudication process happens not at any democratically arrived at body, adjudication body. No, it's WTO, corporate overlords, if you will, that are going to determine what laws our democracy will be able to pass. So I was really happy to see that go away. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to come here today and to see so many Democratic activists in one spot. I really am worried for democracy across the globe. Across the globe, I think it hasn't been under this kind of attack since World War II. So let's keep fighting. Make sure you vote, getting people out, and stay active. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Larry. All right, our next speaker is Natasha Skorupa. She is the field director for Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who's the sponsor of HJR 48. Natasha has worked as a community organizer, union organizer, and proud canvasser for over 20 years in Seattle and around the country for groups such as Washington Can, the AFL-CIO's Working America, and several labor unions as a member political mobilizer. Let's welcome Natasha.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Natasha Skorupa, Field Director for Pramila Jayapal, and I wanted to share a story. In 1995, on my first political campaign, I've been working for Washington Can, and the campaign was the Long-Term Care Patients Bill of Rights. And I've come to find out, working for the campaign, which hit home directly for me, I was very passionate about it for reasons actually very similar to you, Megan, that nursing homes and rehabilitation centers had been the cause of death for example, one facility, a dozen wrongful deaths per year, but we're continuing to be able to operate year after year. And the maximum penalty for these nursing homes was $1,000. And so there was no legislation to really enforce rights for those patients. And I'd also come to find out at the time that the nursing home industry was the fourth most powerful lobbying industry in Washington State back in 1995. Who would have thought it? And so we did finally pass the Long-Term Care Patients Bill of Rights with good old grassroots community organizing. But it was my first insight to what corporate power could mean to an everyday person and their dignity and lack of justice and how it's all tied together. And what we're talking about is the for-profit prison industrial complex. What we're talking about is the military-industrial complex, the poisoning of our Latino brothers and sisters working in fields to bring food to our tables, and still people choosing between food or the prescriptions that they need to stay alive. And then Citizen United happens. Boy, am I angry. But hopeful and honored to be here today, to be with Fix Democracy Now! In the event. And so that was from me, and now I'm going to read on behalf of the privilege I have and do my job. So thank you for listening to that. So very honored and proud to be working for the Congresswoman, and I'm going to share a letter that she wrote to her colleagues, asking them to join her in support of her work for this issue. Dear colleagues, most Americans believe our political system is broken. Polling data consistently demonstrates that Americans believe that money is corrupting our political process, and that large corporations are exercising far too much power in society. In these polarized times, this belief is shared by Democrats, Republicans, and independents. It is one of the few policy areas where there is genuine consensus. The United States is supposed to operate as a democratic republic, where we, the people, are sovereign, and where elected representatives cannot pass laws that violate the inherent and inalienable rights protected by our Constitution. The legal doctrines of money equals political speech and corporate constitutional rights were both created by Supreme Court decisions, examples of judicial activism. The question of how to best protect the integrity of elections and the proper role of corporations in society are political questions, and according to our system of government, should be addressed by the elected representatives at the local, state, and federal level. When the court illegitimately turns a political question into a constitutional question, they transform we the people from active sovereign participants into mere spectators. I ask you to join me in a bipartisan effort to return our government to the framework intended by the founders by co-sponsoring House Joint Resolution 48, the We the People Amendment, to amend the U.S. Constitution to make it clear that only natural persons possess inherent and inalienable constitutional rights, and that the expenditure of money in political campaigns is not protected speech. This approach has the overwhelming support of the American people. Over 80% of Americans support this approach when surveyed. Over 700 jurisdictions at the local and county level have passed resolutions in support of abolishing these doctrines. Even more telling is that the issue has been won at the ballot box in over 350 communities, as well as 4 statewide initiatives. And these referendums have won everywhere, rural, suburban, and urban communities. It's also won in areas considered conservative, liberal, and moderate. The American people want action. To co-sponsor the We the People Amendment, please contact my office. So I thought that contained a lot of good information from the voice of Congresswoman Camilla Jayapal. And now I'd like to read a statement that was written for the attendance of an audience, not reading a letter. Hello everyone, it's so good to see you all here today. I am so grateful for the work by Move to Amend to reclaim our elections for we the people, not we the corporations. It's been nearly 10 years since the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United ruled that corporations are persons with rights to buy elections and run our government. But we all know people. Are corporations people? No! No, that's right. That's why I'm proud to be the sponsor of House Joint Resolution 48, the We the People Amendment. HJR 48, the We the People Amendment, would recognize that only people, not corporations, have constitutional rights. This is just basic common sense and foundational to our country. Our Constitution says we the people, not we the corporations. When corporations have rights, our rights become meaningless. I believe our democratic values are worth more than what any corporation can pay. And that's why when I first ran for Congress, I took Move to Amend's pledge, because I believe that corporations exist to serve the public welfare, not for the public to serve them. This is not a partisan issue. 3/4 of all Americans, including 66% of Republicans, back a constitutional amendment to end money as a form of free speech. And 88% of Americans want to reduce the influence that large campaign donors wield over lawmakers. And as a member of Congress, I know that we are supposed to be the people's house. We are proud to be the people's house, but we need to start acting like it. And we need to put a stop to big corporate money working against the interest of everyday Americans. It's hard to beat back against these moneyed interests to make our voices heard, and it's unjust that we even have to. But we didn't stand for that sort of plutocracy in 1776, and we won't stand for it now. That's why we need to pass HJ 48, the We the People Amendment. Today we have 51 co-sponsors on the bill, and we'll work hard together to support it in the House. Is that number updated?
64.
64, thank you. Yes. And thank you for everything you do to restore the voice of the people of our democracy.
Our next speaker, some of you may already know him. Nick Licata is a retired member of the Seattle City Council, ending in 2015 after being elected to 5 terms and serving 18 years on the council. He's also the author of 2 books, a children's novel, and a book on citizenship, Becoming a Citizen Activist, which is also available in the back for purchase. So let's bring up Nick Licata.
Thank you, Cindy, and it's good to be here. It's good to see many of the folks that I've worked with in the past and hopefully will be working with you in the future. I also want to give a couple of shout-outs immediately, of course, for Fixed Democracy, but I also want to once again touch on what Linda and Judy had talked about, the move to amend, because you know, I think all of us have been sort of browbeaten about how bad Citizens United is, and I also appreciate Congresswoman Camille Jayapal also for being a leader in trying to get that overhaul. It's going to be a large task. But I do want to point out that when it was passed, literally that week after they did some surveying, and the majority of the Democrats and the Republicans did not support it. And in addition, a general survey that was done by one of the major TV networks showed that 72% of people wanted to have limitations on what politicians could spend or receive money from the corporation. So this is an issue that can and should be won, and we need leaders like Congresswoman Camille Jayapal who understand where we're coming from. I also want to say that it's just not, you know, I noticed listening to whatever we've been talking about, we're all talking about the big issues, right? We're talking about the national issues. But we live in the city of Seattle, which has in fact set the trend on a number of important issues. Paid sick leave, minimum wage, secure working hours. A council member, Lorena Gonzalez, is really going to speak about other items that she's pushing for and has pushed for in the past, and I appreciate that. But there has been a trickle down from Citizens United. I was looking at some numbers, and in 2009, independent expenditures accounted for $135,000 in city council elections. That's 2009. It was Citizens United that passed in 2010, and then in 2015, it went from 135 to 784,000, just about 6 times the amount of money from IE. Now, 2019, right? It went from, rounded off, 800,000 to $3.9 million, and that's October 10th. The election period isn't over. What has happened is, and those of you familiar with the Brandon Institute for Justice have identified the big fear we have that corporations are going to move in and use United Citizens' decision. And what's interesting is that actually what it's turned out to be is the billionaires and the wealthy people. I mean, there is a wealth gap in this country, but what this means is that they don't even need a corporation to go through. Now it's just basically the billionaires and the rest of us. There was a study done that showed that in the period of time since it's been enforced, and this I think just went to like 2014 or something, there have been I'm trying to think, $1 billion super PACs that spent 60% of that $1 billion came from 195 people. Okay? So, we have a problem here in Seattle, and we can do something about it. One of the problems we sometimes have is that we talk about these great issues, and we have to get organized about them and figure out. Our city council, I think, is literally, and it's been said again and again, one of the most progressive in the city. But it's not just because you elect progressive people to the city council, okay? It's because we have citizens here who care. It's because we have council members who work with citizens. Because we have a structure in Seattle that we need to support. You know, sometimes people complain about the Seattle process. We literally have many, many citizen commissions, but those commissions play a critical role in everything from people with disabilities, people who are concerned about pedestrian safety, people who are concerned about, obviously, human rights, gay rights, also labor concerns. One of the things that I talk about since I've been outside the city council, that I write about, and I talk to groups about, is that we have a tremendous amount of power in front of us. It's like looking at a tool shed. There's all kinds of tools in there. You just have to be basically aware that they're in there and how to use them effectively, okay? And we can't continually just come out with a mantra and we have to get organized. We can't just say that. We just can't obviously go to protest. We have to think of what is out there. For instance, I always say, look at the city charter. They have power that you don't necessarily realize you have. That's how we got paid sick leave. We didn't realize we had the authority in the city to establish paid sick leave for all employees, not just city employees. And then other people came to us, and came to me and said, you have this power. But you have to pass legislation, and you have to continually maintain it. You have to not just say, oh, we passed something good. It's like elected someone to office. Elected someone to be good. That's great. He'll take care of it. No. You have to work with them, and quite honestly, you have to monitor it. You have to make, you don't necessarily say the Saul Alinsky perspective, always beat them up. No. I view every person who's elected to the city council, and I mean this, every person in the city council is a potential ally on some issue. Find out where you're going to go to get to be an ally for you. But you have to do the homework. You have to learn how to organize. One of the things you can do is you can start forums. I just helped organize a group 2 nights ago to do a forum on culture and arts. That was not an issue in the city council election. There had been no forum on that. We got arts organizations from every city to make sure that every council member is aware of it. Now, arts is not frivolous. Arts is an organizing tool. You can get to more people through poetry and art than you can through a dogma, okay? So, also, you have to follow through on things you do. 2 quick examples. Before I left the council, I was working for divestment in our retirement fund. And we forced, literally, them to do a study to show how they could basically divest from carbon-generating businesses. That work still needs to happen. We still need, we've got 50 years, we still need to work with city council members to make sure we move forward, to make sure that we can make those withdrawals. The second is, we passed all the state labor law. They really good. We set the trend throughout the country. But it isn't any good unless it's enforced. That's why we created the Office of Labor Standards. We have to make sure that that office is working with community groups. We have to make the surveys are done on businesses to make sure that, in fact, they are providing the minimum wage and providing paid sick leave. A lot of times people don't. Sometimes it's just not because they're greedy, they're just lazy, and they figure no one's going to check, and they just let things drift aside. We, the people in this room, the people in the city, we have a responsibility to make sure that our allies in the city council, and those who can be allies, know that we're here, we know what they're doing. We have to understand the various levels of government and how we can basically take power and make sure they take power for us. I'm just going to wrap up and say that one of the critical elements when someone's on the city council or any government position, the most important thing they have access to is knowledge. That's the form of reports, that's in the form of knowing what the other people in that office say and do. Make sure they share that information with you. And don't be afraid to be innovative. Toss out ideas of what you think might possibly work and see if they'll go with it. I believe a lot of people who are elected to office really want to do the right thing, but often they get lost, often they get tired. We are there to be the spark, to be the energy. Now, I try to take what I did on the city council and before that, as basically a citizen organizer, not paid, just being involved in various things. I wrote down my ideas, how to get something done. I did it in 2 forms. I did it in a free pamphlet. It's in the back. There aren't very many. It's available. You know, I'm giving a fancy title, 7 Steps to Becoming a Citizen Activist. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it helps you structure ideas. The other thing is, obviously, I wrote a book, Becoming a Citizen Activist. It's in the back, $15 before I leave. Anybody wants one, sign a copy. But it's in the library. Take it out from the library, or, you know, Amazon, you have cheaper copies. You can probably get those. But look at it and think when you're working on any issue you're working on. And I do the same thing myself. You forget. Think about what are the steps that I can take. What are the steps I can work with my neighbors to do? It's just like going down a journey, one step at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Our final speaker today, in speaking of allies in government, we approached her about the Seattle ordinance, and she has been in favor of that. She's going to talk a little bit about that, about some other things she's doing to address some of the issues going on in Seattle. Lorena Gonzalez is one of 2 at-large citywide representatives and the first Latinx elected to serve in the Seattle City Council. I did not know that, and until I wrote this down. Councilmember Gonzalez has over a decade of experience as a civil rights attorney and community advocate. She is also nationally recognized as a civil rights leader. So let's welcome Lorena Gonzalez.
So I'm gonna try to make this quick and hopefully painless, but informative nonetheless. I want to start off by just acknowledging that we are in a house of labor, and really want to thank Larry Brown for all of his leadership at the state level with Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. Thank you so much. It's really important for us as we talk about democracy to acknowledge that labor and the labor movement is one of the key ways that, especially here in Seattle, but all over the country, we organize ordinary working class people and their families to acknowledge and understand their power to move systems and to move it towards the arc of justice, whether it's economic justice, justice for immigrants and refugees, our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters. This is so important for us to acknowledge because our labor movement is just key to what we can do here in Seattle and beyond. And it is often said that in the city of Seattle, if you want to be in politics, you better be the labor candidate. And I'm proud to be one of those labor candidates. I'm also really excited to be here with Cindy and all of you and Fix Democracy Now! On this really, is it Fix Democracy first? Because Democracy Now! Is the show. No, I know that is happening. I could blame my pregnancy brain, but I don't think that's what's happening. So I really want to thank you all for your advocacy in this space and for reaching out to me very early on to talk about what we can do here in our local elections to make sure that we send a very clear and loud message that our democracy, our elections, who we believe should represent us and what our values are simply not for sale. just talk about the numbers. They're atrocious. We've gone from $135,000 in independent expenditures in local city council elections to almost $4 million. That is shameful. And it is not our money. It is not our interest. It is their interest. It is large corporations who've been emboldened in a belief that our city council and our city is just too progressive for their comfort. And what does that mean? What does it ultimately mean? Let's think about it. Amen, Sister Kara, scared shitless. Here's the reality, right? We are now we've gone from 2009 to 2019 with a city council that is super majority women, super majority women on our city council for the first time in history of the city council. We are a majority people of color city council, and our average age is about in the 40s. But it's more than that. All of those statistics that I just read off to you are also represented in our lived experiences. Renters, people who don't have multi-million-dollar accounts or assets that we declare at the end of the year. I'm one of the brokest council members on the city council. I'm actually quite proud of that, because it means I'm closer to the people I represent than most council members ever have been. Right? I understand what it means to struggle in a city that is experiencing extreme income inequality. My husband is a server at a restaurant in West Seattle. I grew up as a migrant farm worker to two parents who first came to this country as undocumented immigrants from Mexico. And when we're dealing with attacks from the left, from the right, from everywhere when you're an immigrant and a refugee, these are the issues that we are representing and fighting for every day. And that should be valued in our democracy. It is what we were elected to do. And the only reason I'm able to stand up here and represent all of you is because there was the passage of honest elections and the access to ordinary people to participate. The first two council members to go through the Honest Elections Democracy Voucher Program. And I have to tell you, the first check I received from the Democracy Voucher Program, before I even qualified, was $185,000. Wow. I was astonished. And I was also humbled. Because it meant that even without asking, people believed in the work that we were doing, in the fight for things like secure scheduling laws so that hourly workers in restaurants and retail can have predictability in their schedules 2 weeks in advance. Simple stuff. So that I can continue to fight for paid family medical leave policies and access to affordable childcare in our city for every person who needs to access it. These are bread and butter things that make the lives of working class people in our city easier every single day. And together with people on the outside who advocate for building these movements, for advocating for these progressive policies, have been with me and with others on the city council every step of the way, saying we need you, we want you, we demand that you take this progressive, bold action and lead the way like Seattle has always done nationally. And since passing all of these laws that I've just been talking about, I had an opportunity to share those lessons and experiences with advocates and activists across the country, and also with other elected leaders who are progressive and passing similar laws, even better laws than we're passing across the country. Congresswoman Jayapal is currently right now advancing a domestic worker bill of rights at the federal level to protect the women, largely women of color, taking care of our children and elderly across the country. It is because we moved that here together with our labor partners and nannies and other workers in Seattle, and we're so grateful to be able to have the support of so many people in the community to be able to be bold and to think bold. But all of that is under threat. And it is under threat in a way that is really frightening and should be frightening to all of us through this example of this 2019 election cycle. $4 million. How many of you have spent $4 million in an election cycle? Yeah. I wish. I'm not sure we'd be here right now. It is an extraordinary amount of money that is concentrated within a small circle of corporations. I almost said people, but they're not people. They're corporations. And they are betting on the fact that we don't know better. That we are willing to sell our vote to the highest bidder. That we are not smart enough to look at the facts and to really see through the dog whistle messaging that they're putting out there, and in some instances, straight up lies about what the city council has and has not done. At the end of the day, when I run for re-election in 2 years, if it's as ferocious as it is now, and I end up losing my seat because my values are too progressive, I'm absolutely fine with that. Because I will know that I have fought so hard to make them so uncomfortable that they had no choice but to do the dark, dark work of stealing our elections and our democracy. But we have a way to prevent that. And that's through this bill that we're going to be advancing next year. Early on in the year, we're going to introduce a bill that will take the power away from foreign influence corporations in local elections. Expenditures from corporate PACs in our city local elections to no more than $5,000 a cycle. And it will require these foreign-owned corporations or foreign-controlled corporations to declare publicly that they are a foreign-controlled corporation, so that we, the people, the real people represented by our democracy, know exactly who the devil is in these elections. And this is going to be a really important fight. We are quite literally right now gathering all of the data and the statistics that I think are going to support passage of this bill. We've been working closely with many people in this room and outside of this room to really make the case for why this is important in Seattle elections. And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. We all supported honest elections. And we did that because we wanted to make sure our elected officials, people like me, spent time talking to you and not the people whose pockets are so deeply lined with money that we lose sight of why we are really here, and it's to work for you and to be accessible to you. The money interests just want us to defend the status quo. And I'm not here to defend the status quo. I'm here to change the status quo, to work for people who are struggling every day to make ends meet and to make sure that they continue to have a place in our city and in our county and in our state and across the country. And we have an opportunity to send a very clear message next legislative session to say, we are not going to sell our elections to the highest bidder. And we're going to have a lot of information, unfortunately, from this cycle that is going to support why it's important for us to do this. So I'm really excited to continue to work with all of you. We got great news from our from the PDC, the state public disclosure commission at the state level, who actually signaled support for this piece of legislation at the city level to our local Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission, so that we're checking through this list of support. We're going to need more support. We're going to work with you all to make sure that you know exactly when we're having hearings. We want you in council chambers. We want to hear your testimony. We want your letters. We want your emails. We want your phone calls, because there is a lot at stake in terms of what we stand to lose. We are the most progressive city council in the nation. we are at risk of losing that reputation through this election cycle. And it's because of one reason and one reason only: money, corporate money in particular, and a strong interest that they hold in continuing to invest in the status quo. So when they say that the city council isn't listening and that that's why we need change, what they're really saying is there's too much representation for working families, for the elderly, for the poor, for the downtrodden, for women, for children, for black people, for brown people, for immigrants, for refugees. That's what they need when they say we're not listening to them. So let's keep that in mind. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get ready to fight and work, because our democracy is worth it. So thank you for having me and all of you.
So yes, that's very exciting that we're going to be doing that next year. I want to encourage everybody to stay, but before, let's just give a big round of applause to all our speakers today. Linda, could you hand those out to each group? What we're going to do now, and hopefully you can stick around because I know we're past time. I told you we're going to, but if you can stick around for another 20 minutes or so, we really want to have some small group discussion. Linda's handing out, and there's, can somebody follow her behind with the pens? Where's Ken? Great. So basically, just choose someone at your table to take notes, and include who's in your group if they're with any organization. Put all the notes in the handout, we'll collect them afterwards. And then we'll compile the notes and share them. We won't have time to share any of the thoughts, but we'll do that. So give it to a group. We would like some small intimate group discussion. Everybody, can I have your attention just for 1 second, or I just want to review the questions real quick. Linda's still handing them out. But we just have 3 questions. What have you learned today or elsewhere about the challenges we have in common? What are our common issues? What are some shared goals, and how can we accomplish them together? And are there any upcoming opportunities where we can work together? Because we're hoping to continue this discussion further from today. This is just the beginning, and we're hoping to do more of this. So take some time in your groups, and we'll come back and close in about, say, 4:25. Thank you.